When the bank clerk asked me to leave, it finally hit me. I realized that I was truly, completely broke. My account balance said it all, plain as day, $0.47. At that moment, I was wearing an old suit I had bought 5 years earlier, with a pocket full of discount coupons I had saved by pinching pennies. Yes, I was always known as the frugal one. No coffee, no takeout, no new phone, no travel. Even my birthday cake came from the supermarket clearance rack. Everyone said I was the poster child for financial discipline. And yet there I was, standing in a bank, unable to afford the transaction fee. The irony is that I wasn't reckless with money. No debt, no luxury goods, no wild spending sprees. I spent my entire life cutting costs. But I never learned how to make money work for me. While home prices doubled, stocks climbed, and opportunities passed, what was I doing? I was walking an extra 20 minutes just to save $3 on parking. I used to believe that if I was disciplined enough, the money would add up. Reality proved me wrong because even careful people can still lose everything. That is why I went broke. Not because I loved spending money, but because I was terrified of using it. My friend, if any of this sounds like your story, I hope this helps you. Trust me, I have been there, and it's a wake-up call you never forget. Here is the lie that keeps a lot of people completely broke. The person who looks disciplined is not always making the best money decisions. In fact, sometimes it's the exact opposite. You have seen this person, and maybe you are this person. No coffee shop stops, and paper towels get reused until they practically file a complaint. A 20-minute detour to save 3 cents a gallon feels like victory. Standing under fluorescent lights, comparing 2 tubes of toothpaste like a Wall Street merger. On the surface it looks responsible, and it even feels responsible. But then you check the bank balance, the credit card, and the stress level, and somehow none of that effort turned into actual progress. That is the part nobody wants to hear. A lot of what gets praised as good with money is just performance. It is nothing more than financial theater. It gives you the emotional reward of being careful, without necessarily giving you the economic reward of getting ahead. And that is why so many people can spend years trying hard and sacrificing constantly, saying no to every tiny pleasure, and still feel like their finances never move. Because frugal and financially smart are not twins. Sometimes they do not even live in the same house. Real financial intelligence is not about squeezing every penny until it screams. It is about understanding what something costs you in full. Not just the price on the tag, but the replacement and the friction. The wasted hour, the lower quality and the missed chance. The decision fatigue, the physical annoyance and the mental drag. And then there is the other trap, becoming a genius at saving tiny amounts while staying blind to the giant leaks. People feel incredibly virtuous for skipping a $6 coffee, while overpaying thousands on a car and carrying credit card debt that chews through their month, living in the wrong place, or simply never pushing for better pay. That is not strategy, that is using a spoon to empty a pool, while a fire hose is blasting into the deep end. The money trap here is ugly because it hides behind discipline. Someone celebrates saving $4.17 on socks during lunch, then ignores the decision that is bleeding them dry every single month. That tiny win feels productive, and it gives a little hit of control, but the actual math behind it is completely embarrassing. If you spend 50 minutes hunting for microscopic discounts, while your bigger financial problems sit completely untouched, you are not solving a money problem, you are just decorating it. Cutting a latte feels easier than changing jobs, easier than admitting the car payment is too high, easier than opening the credit card app and looking at the balance without flinching. Now take that same logic and look at what happens when people refuse to spend on anything that buys back time. This one sounds noble right up until you count the hours. A person will gladly burn an extra 2 hours doing something the hard way, just to avoid paying for convenience. 2 hours, not 2 minutes. They take the longest route and wrestle with awful software, keep the broken appliance alive with pure resentment, and turn every ordinary errand into a grim little side quest. Then they call that responsibility, but if it keeps happening, it's not cute anymore. That is a system, and 2 hours a week becomes 8 hours a month. And this is where the second receipt shows up, because time is never just time. Time arrives attached to energy, to attention, and to recovery, to the ability to think clearly after work instead of feeling cooked. If paying a little removes hours of friction every single week, that trade is incredible, because those hours can go to rest, exercise, learning, or actual earning. People love to act like convenience is laziness, but plenty of cheap routines are just expensive routines with moral branding. You save a few dollars, then lose the bandwidth you needed for the thing that would have moved your life forward. Then it gets even worse with doing things yourself. Doing it yourself can save money, sometimes. But some people try to do their own taxes and their own repairs. Their own paperwork, their own editing, their own everything. Not because it makes sense, but because paying anyone feels like losing. That is the emotional glitch. They are not making a financial decision anymore. They are just defending an identity. So they do a bad job slowly, stress themselves out, and pay later anyway. The part nobody wants to admit is this. A lot of frugal behavior is really just renting your life out at a discount. You save cash in one column, then quietly hand over your time, your energy, and your attention, and your earning power in another column. That is not equal sacrifice, that is a bad trade. When your weekend disappears under a leaking sink you don't know how to fix. When a tax mistake turns into a bill with the emotional taste of regret. When you spend 2 days stressed, irritated, and still call a professional anyway. You didn't protect wealth, you volunteered to be the cheapest labor in your life. And that is the real split most people miss. People with assets think in terms of leverage. People without assets are often taught to think in terms of endurance. Just do more yourself. Push through, squeeze harder, and be disciplined. But ownership changes the equation. If your hour can be used to make decisions or deepen a client relationship, improve a system, or rest enough to perform well next week, or build a skill that pays you back for years, then burning that same hour on clumsy repairs is not noble, it's expensive. The wealthy are not superior because they never lift a finger. They are different because they know which fingers should touch which tasks. They protect the hours that compound, and outsource the hours that merely consume. The same thing shows up even more brutally with skills. A lot of people will defend a tiny monthly saving like it's sacred, but refuse to spend $1 becoming more valuable. They will keep the old software, skip the certification, and avoid the course. Put off learning sales, writing, coding, editing, or public speaking, anything that could actually raise their ceiling. Why do they do it? Because cutting feels controlled. That is where the ownership logic gets ruthless. If you own skills, systems, judgment, and reputation, the world pays you differently. If you own none of that, you mostly sell stamina, and stamina is the easiest thing for the system to burn through. The person obsessing over a tiny discount while refusing to build a higher value skill is not being protected by caution, they are being trapped by it. They are easier to underpay and easier to replace, and easier to keep busy with low-level problems forever. So when people say they are saving by staying here, the harder question is, who benefits from you staying depleted? Because a drained person is easier to manage than an energized one. Easier to undercharge, easier to delay, and easier to keep reacting instead of building. That is the layer beneath the budgeting talk. Some people own assets that free their time. Other people sit inside affordable conditions that quietly strip away their ability, the ability to ever accumulate those assets. Which one have you been calling discipline? Here is the practical fix, and it's almost insultingly small. Before any non-bill purchase, put it on a 24-hour hold list. Not in your head, but on one note in your phone called tomorrow. Item, price, date, and that is it. If you still want it tomorrow, look at it and ask 2 questions. Does this remove a recurring problem, or does it create a lasting benefit? If the answer to both is no, you are probably not buying value. You are buying relief, boredom, or identity. Or a tiny emotional sedative dressed up as a good deal. And that is exactly where cheap habits mutate into expensive lives. This is not a budgeting personality test, it is a brake pedal. Because the people who get trapped by fake frugality don't lose on one giant mistake, they just bleed out through autopilot. They say no to a tool that would save them hours every week, then say yes to 5 random low-cost purchases that leave nothing behind. They cling to cash because investing feels scary, then quietly watch inflation and interest do their work in the dark. They cut every enjoyable thing, then one bad week later they snap, and they spend like they are escaping prison. So don't start with some heroic financial reboot. Start by interrupting the reflex. Make it mechanical, and when you get paid, move a fixed amount automatically. If you have high interest debt, the transfer goes there. If your emergency fund is weak, it goes there until it hits its target. If both are handled, it goes into a broad, boring investment automatically. No debate, no monthly soul-searching, and no waiting to feel ready. Money that stays in your checking account too long starts attracting stories. Suddenly you might need it, and then you deserve something small. And then the small thing has cousins. The point is to reduce the number of decisions that your weakest version of yourself is allowed to make. And for the deprivation problem, use one rule that sounds simple but exposes everything. Protect one small spending category on purpose. Maybe it's decent groceries, or maybe it's shoes that don't destroy your feet. Maybe it's one dinner out a month with someone you actually care about. Maybe it's paying for convenience in the one part of your week that always collapses. Pick one, keep it, and stop treating every pleasant expense like moral failure. If your plan only works by making your life feel gray, cramped, and joyless, it is not discipline, it is a countdown to backlash. So the boring move is the real move. One hold list, one automatic transfer, and one protected category. That's enough to separate spending that serves your life from spending that hijacks it. Which of those three would change your money fastest if you did it this week? Don't leave this with some fantasy about becoming perfectly optimized. Leave with an exit route. If a frugal habit is making you smaller, slower, or more drained, or more likely to make dumb, expensive decisions later, you are allowed to stop. You do not need permission from the internet to replace fake discipline with useful discipline. Wealth is not built by acting broke in every category forever. It's built by protecting cash, time, energy, and earning ability at the same time. That is the real promise here. Not that you will get rich next month, or that one trick fixes your life. But if you remove even one self-defeating habit, money gets less chaotic. You get a little more breathing room, less friction, and a little more control. So ask yourself one uncomfortable question before you click away. Which smart habit in your life is secretly billing you twice? The cheap purchase, the tiny saving, or the refusal to pay for time? The habit that gets applause but keeps you completely stuck. Cut it this week, then come back and tell me, which one was the hardest to admit?